All right, everyone. Good evening and welcome to tonight. My name is Sophia Nahawi, Adult Services Associate at the Enoch Pratt Free Library. Thank you for joining us for tonight's Writers Live with Thibault Manekin in conversation with John Brothers. All Pratt Library locations across the city are open at 50% capacity. Please stop into your closest neighborhood branch to check out all of our latest offerings. And so now I will introduce tonight's guests. From the time he was little growing up in Baltimore City, Thibault Manekin wrestled to understand why we as human beings seem so divided. In 2002, Thibault traveled to South Africa, where he combined his passion for bringing people together with a love of sports to help create Peace Players, a nonprofit with the mission of bringing together children from war-torn countries around the world through basketball and dialogue. In 2006, Thibault moved back to Baltimore, where he helped start Seawall, an impact-driven company made up of passionate social entrepreneurs who believe in reimagining the real estate industry as we know it. John Brothers currently serves as the president of the T. Rowe Price Foundation. Dr. Brothers comes to T. Rowe Price from Quidu, an international consulting firm he started and led for over a decade, merging the firm in 2015. Dr. Brothers began his work serving the local community, inspired by growing up in deep poverty. He served as a community organizer and family case manager in urban neighborhoods in the Midwest to leadership positions with local and national organizations on the East Coast. And so now, without further ado, please welcome Thibault Manekin and John Brothers.
All right. So you have this book.
It's fake.
Yeah, that's well. I was saying, I've written 2 books, which I think only nerds that care about nonprofits read. But what I would say is when it comes in the box for the first time, that feeling. And so, give us the background on like what inspired you to do this. There was a day where you're sitting and you said, I'm going to write this thing. What's that about? And has it fulfilled kind of what you thought would happen, at least at this point? Is it going in the direction that you wanted?
Yeah. First of all, John, it's always good to be in space with you.
Of course, always.
Yeah. I want to talk about the box first.
Yeah.
Because when you're getting ready to publish your first book, you look at all of what other authors are doing, and their publisher sends them the box with the first book in, right? And something that you've been working on for 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, 5 years. And it's a huge deal. And with social media now, you're meant to like film yourself opening the box and make a big deal about it and read the first pages. Most people like shed a tear when they're opening their box. And so I get home one day and my kids are there and they're like, Dad, this box came for you. And we opened it and the book is here. And I was like so proud that like my kids were the first to open it and so angry at the same time that like I was going to miss the like social media opportunity but all joking aside, I've lived this really blessed life. I've 100% of the time been in total alignment with my purpose, right? Talked a little bit about this earlier, of this like deep quest to understand why we're so divided as human beings and how we can creatively bridge those divides. Right. And so everything that I've done professionally has just been in total alignment with that. And I have the opportunity to speak a lot, right? When I was running the Peace Players program around the world, I'd give speeches around the country and around the world. The stuff that we're doing with Seawall here, with all the Seawall guys, I have an opportunity to talk a lot as well. And I'd get off stage and people would come and ask me questions around the inclusive approach that I discussed in the talk, right? As if I was speaking a foreign language. So enough people were coming to me, and for me, it was a little bit second nature. It was a little bit of how I was raised, right? To act and treat and serve in this capacity. And so I started taking notes, right? And those notes became a chapter. And then the chapter became a couple chapters. And I think we all have a book within us at the end of the day, right? It's whether we're going to see it through to fruition. And those chapters at the end of the day became a full manuscript. And, once I knew that there was enough there, and that I went all in on it, kind of took that first step, there was no going back.
Yeah. And it's really good. I love it. It's such a great book. One of the things, you were talking, or I've talked to you about your experiences in other places around the world, right? So we've both been in Northern Ireland. I'll be there in a couple of weeks, working in communities that have challenges, kind of seeing eye to eye from time to time. And then you've said, you came to Baltimore and you saw some of the same things, even magnified.
Yeah.
So as you've seen that, can you talk a little bit about that dynamic? And in Baltimore, where have you seen really good spots where folks have come together, but also some of the challenges you've seen in people coming together from all over the world?
Yeah, I mean, I think the beautiful thing about Baltimore is that there are so many challenges, but there are so many people here who would call those challenges opportunities.
Yeah.
And there's just so many pockets of energy. I'm looking at my two friends from Lord Tush back there, and it's just incredible the work that they're doing around reimagining toilet paper.
Yeah, I got 3 rolls in my office right now.
And when I kind of first got back to Baltimore, just like head spinning, the opportunity to get with a guy like Joe Jones and the Center for Urban Families, and the work that they're doing. The challenge is combining the pockets of energy, right? So that they really spread across our entire city, and that they leave no gaps, they leave no one behind, and that everybody feels equally involved in the process. And I think the process is where we struggle, right? We all have a different expectation and understanding of what that's going to look and feel like, and I think that's where a lot of it gets lost in translation. But that's there's so many people here doing incredible work in all sides of the city. It's just bringing it all together.
Yeah, it's true. I mean, I do think we have more innovators are invested in social change per capita than anywhere I've ever seen. Some of the best folks that I've seen. Yeah.
And the challenge is just down in Florida. I was talking about a really different experience down in Lakeland, Florida. And we kind of got to talking about Baltimore, and they're like, how do you live there? It's the city of the wire. And when you compare it, and then we did this when I was down in Florida, when you compare it to a city of like Detroit, right? Stacked up against the same challenges and odds. But Detroit is this city of entrepreneurship, right? You think about it, and everybody knows how far down they sunk.
Yeah.
But you go there if you want to launch a new company. You go there because you're going to feel supported. There is the support in Baltimore. It's happening. You guys are doing it. Countless other people are doing it. It's just changing the narrative, right? The national narrative and the international narrative of what it means to be from this incredible place.
Yeah.
That I also think is one of the opportunities.
One of the stories that we talked about in the podcast was you mentioned the story of when you were convening community at Lexington Market, and how that went, how that felt, right? And I was there that night, and I had a different take on it, but I do really like, because it relates to the idea that we have communities in this city. It's called Smaltimore, but sometimes these communities might as well be on Pluto and Earth. They don't come together. And what you see is when we try to bridge those communities coming together, that's what we should do, but it's tough. And that example that you talked about in terms of the community meeting at Lexington Market, I just find a fascinating case study of voices coming together, how difficult that is, but that if you stick to it. So I'd love you, if you don't mind, kind of talking about that and how it meant to you and what it felt to you. I think that'd be great.
Yeah. So I often describe that as one of my biggest professional failures, right? And the context behind it was that we'd spent 12 months quietly behind the scenes organizing and listening throughout the entire city of Baltimore.
Yeah.
This was an incredible honor to be able to help transform Lexington Market. And we were really clear that if it was going to work, all of Baltimore had to fall in love with it, right? This couldn't be forced onto the city. This had to be the city kind of crafting and molding it.
Yeah.
Not the city, the municipality, but the people of Baltimore. So we spent 9-12 incredible months listening throughout all of Baltimore, all corners, neighborhood association meetings, there's a little 5 to 10 minute presentation around like, here's what we understand the project could be. What do you all need from this part of town in order for you to really fall in love with it again? And after the listening, we had enough content and enough direction to have our first neighborhood associate town hall style meeting, right? Where we invited, I think hundreds of people showed up to that first one. It was a big deal, right? And I was carrying this like subconscious and this imposter syndrome that is like a white man from a fairly white led company, that like I had no business being the face of the Lexington Market project. It wouldn't be well received. It wasn't the right message. There was nobody else at Seawall that really that would be able to carry that forward either.
Right.
And so we made a really conscious decision to bring somebody on, an amazing man named Pickett Slater Harrington.
So great.
African American gentleman that has taught us so much over the years. He's on our advisory board. And Pickett was a little bit of the external spokesperson for the Lexington Market project. Pickett connects to community the way you do, John.
Right.
You know, he really gets it. He listens. He has no ego or personal agenda. And we really respected that. So for the first neighborhood association meeting or town hall, several hundred people show up, and Pickett gets up there and probably delivers one of the better presentations I've ever seen, right? Just really kind of lays out the last 12 months of listening, and then invites people up to come speak. And there's a little microphone sitting out in there, and there's a line of people that line up. And I think the first comment was nice enough, right? And appreciative enough. And then the second comment, somebody had stood up there and started asking questions about Seawall. You know, what business did Seawall as a company have even taken on a project like this? Like, Seawall exists to gentrify communities. What was this going to be? Another Our House project, which is another food hall we had done. And how intentional were we about continuing to displace people and really kind of laying into Pickett.
Right.
And Pickett was new to Seawall.
Right.
And if anything, he was really only on the Lexington team. He didn't have 15 years worth of history. He didn't know how to answer a single one of those questions. And I sat behind a column, one of the big columns in the old in the building there, and I hid, you know, and I watched Pickett up there struggle and deflect questions and look bad because it wasn't capable of answering the questions. And I froze. And it ended, and more people kind of piled on to the trajectory of those initial questions.
Yeah.
And we all left feeling completely deflated. And I didn't sleep that night, and saw Pickett the next day at the meeting, and at a meeting in our office, and pulled him aside afterwards and gave him a big hug and cried and apologized and said, I failed you. Those questions weren't directed to you. They were directed to me. And I didn't have the strength and courage to stand up and own it.
Yeah.
Right. And I talk a lot about this in the book, is this concept of leadership. Right. And there are a lot of Seawall folks here, and you guys know my style would be to lead from behind, right? Let everybody else shine. And rarely do I have to step in, but there are moments where we have to step in as leaders.
Right.
And I've had many of those throughout life. And that one with Pickett in that moment, like, was a complete miss on my part, and an amazing lesson as well.
Right.
You know, like, I vowed from that moment forward never to let fear allow me to sit on the sidelines. I knew where I belonged, which was to go up on that stage, give Pickett a huge hug, thank him for the incredible presentation up to that moment, and answer those questions.
Right.
So really awesome learning opportunity.
Yeah. I mean, I was there that night, and I spent my life in the basements of churches and in community centers. And so I kind of assumed that there was going to be some stickiness. And as I went through that and ended the night, my feeling was like, oh, this was a really great community meeting. I mean, they were digging into you, but I was like, that's awesome, right? Because ultimately, if you're trying to get to, you know, if social change was this thing where you're just like, hey, let's do that and high five each other, and then like it's going to happen, it's not going to happen that way. And I think as I left that night and was looking, I was like, that's as awesome a discussion on community and thinking about where to go. Now, it was uncomfortable for you, and I totally get that. I think as I left, and now what we're looking at now, I was just saying, I drove by it today and I was like, oh my God, like I got butter. I'm not even the builder of it. And I was like, that place looks awesome.
Yeah.
I don't think you would have got there if it did feel community owned, if you hadn't done that hard work, right? And it certainly won't be as receptive coming on the other side. But I left that meeting saying this was a really great community meeting. But I understand definitely what you were saying.
Yeah, we did too. It's the lesson that came along the way, because they could have been even better, right? Like, had me or one of us like stood up and owned the answers to those questions, then you would have seen our heart. Then you would have seen our soul. We left there as developers,
right?
You know, we didn't leave there as neighbors, right? We left there as like maybe unwelcomed guests. And I think that, you know, anytime I'm looking at my buddy John in the audience here, anytime I hear anybody that says anything bad about me or Seawall, like, it hurts my feelings.
Of course.
And now, like, I'm on the phone or finding them on social media or emailing them or having a friend connect me, because only when we're sitting face to face and being really vulnerable and understanding our trajectories and our journeys and how we got to where we are and why we were passionate about what we are, can we begin to bridge those divides.
Right.
And I'm like batting 1,000% on like converting people when I get to have that like face-to-face opportunity with them. And again, we talked a little bit earlier in a smaller group about the importance of getting out of our comfort zones. It is so uncomfortable to call somebody who is publicly hates you, and is very vocal about it, and say, I just want to talk.
That is hard.
I want to see you.
Yeah, that's hard. You know, so you know, we live in a world where things like the words like purpose can be almost jargony. And so, you know, I regard you as a friend, and when I got the book, I was like, oh, purpose, I wonder if it will be that jargony thing. But as I read through it, what I was most impressed by was the connection between industry and purpose, which for me connects to the how of how you do work as a developer. Certainly you're doing the work of developing, but then there's the way you do the work. When I think about the work that I do in corporate philanthropy and social good, there's the act of doing that, but it's the how, I think, that we've been recognized. So can you talk a little bit about industry and purpose, and maybe intertwine the how and how you think about the intersection of those?
Well, you and I have talked a lot about this. There's so much floating out there about the why, which is like the purpose, which is like, to me, it's the jargon at this point, right? And look, finding our purposes is amazing. And when you're blessed enough to, it just makes life that much more beautiful. But we got so caught up in the why and the purpose that we lost track of the how. You can have this beautiful purpose and do a terrible job of like bringing it to life. Making others feel included and a part of it, right? Giving everybody that elusive sense of pride of ownership and authorship, what's getting created. And so I've learned that from you, right? That was like an aha moment of less focus on the why and more focus on how you get there, right? Not at how you get there, but how we get there, and the industry is a funny word, right? You think of like big factories and like Amazon and massive trucks and maybe even freight trains and stuff. When I talk about industry, I'm talking about everything from like your local bookshop to a nonprofit, to a dentist office, to an accounting firm, to a real estate. And like, our generation has the responsibility to reimagine how things are done. Right. The old way does not work. Like fact. Right. Those that are able to reimagine things have incredible success behind them. Those that are able to reimagine things where they are leading with their purpose over their profit have even more opportunity for success. You know, we're in the real estate industry at the end of the day, we don't like to like phrase it that way, but it's true.
Why don't you like to phrase it like that?
Yeah, I mean, you know, I think that there's baggage with the idea of being in real estate, right? And so if you were to go to Google real estate development companies, and you'd click on the first 10 things that popped up, all 10 of them are going to say as their catch line, we maximize shareholder
Mm-hmm.
investment and returns.
Right.
Like that's what the market's focused on. That's what the industry has been focused on.
Right.
If you were to go to Seawall's website, it would say reimagining real estate so that buildings are used to empower communities, unite
Mhm.
cities, and help to launch powerful ideas.
Right.
I bet if you asked 100 people under the age of 30 years old, which company would be more exciting to work with, they're going to choose the one where that purpose is clearly around doing things in a different way,
Right.
doing things with that like purpose wrapped up into them. The important piece is not losing track of the how.
Yeah.
And the how is the deep listening, right? I talk a lot about that in the book too.
Yeah.
Is making sure that you're bringing everybody along with you on the ride.
Yeah. Yeah. You know, you talk a lot of leaders in here that I really respect. What are the biggest takeaways as you think about the different leaders like that you carry with you now? Like, I mean, there's so much in here. You can't take every leadership lesson and carry it with you every day, but what are the leading ones that like, of the folks that you spoke to and are really admiring and writing on and talking about, like, what are the biggest takeaways that you have that guide you every day? Does that make sense?
Are you talking about the folks in life that I've looked up to?
Yeah, the leaders that you, and, you know, and obviously my favorite podcast of yours is the one that you do with your dad. So my assumption is that the leadership lessons he's teaching you, you could point to those every day, but some other also folks that have helped guided your leadership that you use.
Yeah. I mean, my dad's number one on the list,
Mm-hmm.
you know, like not even up for debate.
Yeah.
And I have appreciated him more now that I am a dad,
Mm-hmm.
because his way of leading is the hardest, right? He had never sat any of us down growing up,
Right.
or even at Seawall, and told us that we were doing something wrong.
Right.
And told us that this is how he does it, which is why he's succeeded in life.
Right.
His way has been to only lead by example. You know, he is himself in the most vulnerable way. And, you know, as a kid, you don't realize how closely you're actually watching that.
Right.
And there was a stage of me in my like rebellious like 20s where I was carried resentment for not having him sit down and say, Dad, well, you know what, why didn't you give me more lessons? Why didn't you teach me more? Why didn't you tell me that I was perhaps going down the wrong path?
Right.
And he just was like unwavering around just being himself. And, you know, now as a father, you're faced with these moments where your kids do something that is out of line with your expectation of how they should be.
Right.
Right. And you can sit them down and tell them what it is you expect out of them, but then you come to this expectation word,
Right.
which is a recipe for disaster.
Yeah,
right?
it's true.
And so I just so appreciate my dad tells a cool story. Now he's got a neat book out too.
He does. Yeah, it's great.
He tells a story in it where he's walking with my son, Finley. My dad stops and picks up a piece of trash on the ground somewhere in one of the neighborhoods where they're walking. And Finley says, hey, my dad does that, you know? And my dad never stopped me and said, I'm going to pick up this piece of trash because we need to make our city a more clean place.
Right. Right.
His dad never told him to do that, but he watched his dad pick up trash.
Right.
I watched my dad pick up trash. And now my son, I didn't know that he saw me stopping and picking up trash along the way.
Well, I walked behind you once, you picked up trash, and I picked up trash too, right? So
Right,
it's not only
yeah.
our kids. Yeah. That's awesome.
So you know, my dad, you know, guys like Freeman Rabowski,
Mhm.
you know, who have just been blessed to have in my life from a fairly young age, kind of like real early 20s.
Yeah.
I heard Freeman speak once at an event, and I said, I want to spend as much time as this man will give me.
Yeah.
And the like guidance and mentorship that he's provided me, and has just been incredible. I don't know that there's a greater human being that I've actually met than Freeman.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, I never met Nelson Mandela and the work that we ended up doing with his organization, and did meet Obama, which was pretty neat. Maybe Obama and Freeman are in the same stratosphere. But a big one is Wes Moore,
Yeah.
too, who wrote the foreword. And, you know, we're probably not sitting here today if it isn't for Wes. I had written the first scribbled notes of a manuscript, and gave it to a bunch of friends, and everyone's like, this is amazing. Like, you're going to change the world. And I sat with Wes, and he just like stares at me a little bit. He's like, it's not good. And it's not good because it's not that it can't be good,
Right.
but you haven't allowed yourself to be vulnerable in it.
Mm-hmm.
And you've only painted this like rosy picture of success and that
Right.
like nothing wrong happens in life and nobody's going to relate to that.
Right.
We are human beings. We mess up every single day. And you need to stop preaching in your writing and telling the reader what they should take away from it. You just need to write beautiful stories
Yeah.
that are reflections of your vulnerable life. And as a result of that, more people will come, and ended up kind of starting from scratch again. And Wes's advice and guidance for over many things, but certainly the book process has been really inspiring.
Yeah. So you also talk about movements in the book, and that also is can be somewhat of a jargony word. Can you talk a little bit about movements that you want to be a part of? That, I don't think anyone that says they lead a movement and truly does it. But what movements are you excited about? What movements do you want to be a part of? What movements are you watching? And what does that word mean to you?
Yeah, it's funny. Like I didn't give it a lot of thought in the writing of it, but that question comes up a lot. It's one of these like sticky, like potentially like jargony words too. And the reality of it is you can't set out wanting to create a movement,
right?
That's like the opposite of what a movement needs to be.
Right.
I think the concept behind it, what I wanted to explore was like, how do we really grow an idea?
Right.
Right? How do we grow an idea in such an inclusive way where everybody who's involved and everybody the idea touches it, from the end users to the communities to the teams, feel that sense of pride of ownership and authorship in what's getting created? Because when we're able to share in that, right, then that idea starts to grow organically. It starts to become larger than yourself. It takes on wings in a way that and gets momentum in a way that if we try to just like push it forward with our own strength, it's just going to hit a wall.
Yeah.
So I think if we're lucky, right, and we really go about it that way, maybe these like small ideas become movements.
Right.
And I'm really more focused on the growth of a business idea in a really different way than we're used to growing business ideas.
Right.
Than I am in the like social movements that take place. Right. I mean, the Black Lives Matter movement's incredible, right? The civil rights movement was and continues to be incredible and powerful. The anti-apartheid movement that I was a part of in South Africa, what was incredible. Those are really like social movements, and those are going to kind of grow on certainly on their own. But I want to focus on the word movement more in the way of how can we bring ideas to life in different ways than we're used to seeing.
Yeah, that's a good point. You brought up our friends from Lore Tush, right? And then I think when I think about Baltimore, someone said the other day that Baltimore is the side hustle capital of the world. Yeah. Right? It's because we have so many people creating all the time. We have so many artists, we have so many makers, we have so many efforts. And that if we think about you and I have spent a lot of time waxing poetic about where Baltimore should be. And so what I'm leading to is getting to as we think about this, not using the word movement, but this kind of sector of innovators and creators in the city of Baltimore. Can you talk a little bit about kind of how do you view them in terms of where Baltimore needs to be? Do you know what I mean? Like, we have this network of amazing folks, small but growing, but with big ideas. What does Baltimore need to do to take that special group and make them larger, expand what they're doing, all of that type? Where's the next seawall in that group, right? Or be so bold, the next T-row, right?
Yeah, it's what's so inspiring is that they're there, right? There are so many people out there flipping things up completely upside down. So much of it comes down to financial capital, but I think the financial capital piece is so much less significant than the social capital side of it. Right. Like, in large part, like, Seawall has succeeded not because of the financial capital, which we actually don't have a lot of, but because of the social capital. Right. The ability to be able to pick up the phone and call just about anybody and help move an idea forward. Right. And help get things unstuck. That social capital is priceless.
It's true.
Right. And I kind of appreciate that about you too, right? Again, with our friends from Lord Tush, you guys came and like, I couldn't believe that was your first presentation that you had given around raising money. It felt like you'd done it 100 times before. And you guys aren't going to have trouble finding capital, right? Your idea is so pure and so needed.
Oh, they made toilet paper cool.
They made toilet paper
Yeah.
cool and relevant.
Yes.
I don't know if anybody's ever done that.
I don't think so.
It was our ability to make a couple phone calls, understand that this wasn't a lane that we knew how to swim in, and make a couple phone calls that introduced you to some folks, I think John included, that hopefully is the difference, right? And I think if we can come together as a city around access to social capital, we have a program at Seawall called it's through our diversity work, and we have a Black Developer Support Initiative.
Right.
The real estate industry is white led and comes with a ton of privilege.
Right.
We fundamentally understand that, and that privilege, what I mean by it is social capital. Right. Access to all of these things. This kind of mentorship program allows any young wanting to grow up into real estate developer to spend as much time with us as they want, to learn as many lessons as they want from us, and to have access to our social capital. Not financial capital, because we don't have a lot of it, right? But social capital is unlimited. And I think we need to find ways to tap in across the city to the folks that have social capital and their desire and willingness to share it, to help grow all of these really important ideas that are going to change the narrative, that are going to make Baltimore that city of not even the side hustle capital, but the like number one hustle capital.
Right. That's really good. You and I have spent a lot of time talking about how do we make sure that I have a son and a daughter. You have two sons, right? And so how do we make sure that our, where we live and the privilege that we have, how do we make sure that our kids see different sides of the world and the dangers of them living in a bubble that doesn't allow them to do that? And so as you wrote this book, Maya, as I read it, because I read it after we had talked about our kids, I felt a little bit of that conversation as I read through it, right? As you think about fatherhood and can you talk a little bit about kind of how you think about raising, two sons with purpose, other than them following you and making sure they pick up garbage, which is awesome. But like, how do you think about purpose and instilling that in your kids, you and Lola?
Look, I don't think about purpose. I think about privilege.
Right.
I'm fully aware of the privilege that I have. Right. And the question that any of us that has any privilege, even if it's the smallest bit, is what are we going to do that to change the narrative? Right. And so again, like, you can't preach to your kids. There's we
could try.
Not going to work. It's not going to work. My favorite chapter in the book is the epilogue at the very end.
Yeah.
And so there's something that I do with my kids, which is anytime we have a free moment on a weekend, we'd get in the car, we'd pack all of the sports equipment that we have, and we'd go to a park in a part of town that we otherwise wouldn't have gone to. Oftentimes we're deep in East Baltimore, West Baltimore.
Right.
I want to say that I understand the privilege of that statement in and of itself.
Right.
That I can make the decision to bring my kids into a part of town and leave when we're done.
Right.
So I don't take any of that for granted. And so we had ended up, and so we had neighborhood days all over, and the deal was that we'd bring all the sporting equipment to the park, and we weren't going to leave until we had deeply connected and made friends.
Right.
And this wasn't me. Like, I'd be off to the sidelines. Yeah. And we had days where we had to get back in the car quick and had really tricky, complicated situations where like our safety was in question. But we had this one day where we ended up in a park over in West Baltimore, and kids started shooting hoops, and there was nobody at the park yet. A couple of the neighborhood kids came out of nowhere, and they asked if they could play, and they were a lot older than my kids.
Right.
And they started this incredible game of 2-on-2 where they divided the teams. Right. It was like one of the kids from the neighborhood and one of my kids, and this epic game of basketball starts. And at at the end of it, they had become like great friends in a way that only sports can really do.
Right.
And the kids invited them to go play like a tag football game. And I had to pull my kids out of that neighborhood that day.
Right.
The baseball league that our kids played in growing up was the John Mosher Baseball League,
Right.
which is the largest African-American baseball league in the country.
Right.
The only white kids in the league,
Right.
A 40-minute commute from where we lived.
Mm.
And my kids didn't know the difference. They didn't know that the Roland
Right.
Park League was an option or the Towson League was an option.
Right.
This was just what baseball was.
Right.
So I'm always making sure that they understand that the world is a beautiful, diverse place, and our city is a beautiful, diverse place full of really different people who think in lots of different ways.
Right.
But being able to kind of like witness that. This past weekend was it's the 20th anniversary of Peace Players, which is the nonprofit that we started that went to war-torn countries and used sports to bridge divides. It has come full circle and now has programs in North America and is particularly in the city of Baltimore. So this past weekend, I got my 2 kids. We had a 2-hour gap between sports, and we went over to East Baltimore in the Oliver kind of Johnson neighborhood at a rec center there. And we go into a gym that looks nothing like the gym that they are about to go play their playoff basketball games in 2 hours from that.
Right.
Low ceilings, poor lighting, poor ventilation, bad floors, poor rims. And Peace Players is running a program there. And John, it was so beautiful.
Yeah.
I was emotional just from seeing it come full circle to my city. But we walked in my kids sprinted in the door. And within seconds had found their niche, right? Their age group, and had started playing in these incredible
That's
games.
super cool. Yeah.
With kids that they otherwise wouldn't have met.
Right.
And I'm really intentional about that. I think if I don't pass anything else on to them, it's going to be that this city and this world's a beautiful place, and it just gets more beautiful with our ability to expand outside of our bubbles and comfort zones.
Can the kids beat you in basketball?
Absolutely not.
Yeah.
I don't even let them.
Nope.
I don't even let them. I go hard.
Yeah. I can imagine.
Yeah.
I can imagine.
They do a lot of stuff better than me. But
skateboarding for sure.
Yeah, it's only a matter of time.
Yeah. It's coming. It's definitely coming.
Yeah.
So as the book is finished, are there things that you weren't able to say that you want to say? Is there, where do you hope to take this and kind of continue to do work on it? Other things you'd like to say that you haven't been able to say? When I see writers, I'm always amazed at what they put down, but I'm always like, what else is in them, right?
Yeah.
What are they thinking of, or how are they going to use this?
Yeah. Look, I think this was just like the first step,
Mm-hmm.
And I've always kind of said that if no one else read it other than my kids, then I felt like it would have kind of succeeded.
Right.
But the next step is that it's a little bit of a difference between like texting somebody and sitting face to face with them. Right. The book is like you'll take what you want out of it, but the real opportunity for the important messages around how to grow ideas comes with the ability to do something like this. Comes with the ability to sit in communities and have conversations, not even really necessarily with the stories that are in the book, but with the lessons that are in the book.
Yeah.
Lexington Market isn't mentioned once in this.
Right.
And has been one of like my greatest teachers. Right. That project. And so, the next step for the book is going to be this like tour, really, hopefully around the country and around the world. Right. Sitting in small and large groups. And I told you of the experience I had down in Florida and the emotion that stirred in the crowd, the sharing that they did on the back end of it.
Yeah, it's such a great story.
I never saw coming, right? But I'm even more motivated now to get out. And I thank the Seawall guys who are in the audience today for, giving me the flexibility to continue to pursue that, because I put a lot into this and want to put a lot into the speaking side of it as well, because I think that's important.
When you went back to Seawall, did they rearrange furniture? Is there things?
They moved offices.
Yeah. How's it look over there?
They looked nothing like when I had first left. Yeah,
that's right. No flip-flop policy.
Yeah.
I know we're at a time where we wanted questions from the crowd, but I can ask questions all day. Do we have any? They're coming.
you didn't even like take a breath and allow me to ask you.
No,
any questions. Like,
you're the star of the
knew
show.
was
I
gonna
could,
flip
you put a
that.
nickel in me and I'll go on forever. So, my wife knows that very, very clearly. So there's two really good questions. The first one is, you've got so many projects and irons in the fire. How do you find time to relax? How do you unwind?
My wife Lola is going to hate this question. I am almost always relaxed. I love every single minute of everything that I'm doing. You know, I'm in complete alignment with my purpose.
Yeah.
Right. I have these two incredible kids. I've got the coolest wife, and this relationship that challenged me every single moment of every single day.
Yeah.
I work with a family of 20 people who push me just as hard as my wife does. We're changing the narrative. You know, the last few weeks it's at Seawall, I've gotten my butt kicked with things that I hoped would move along quicker than they did. And even with those like butt kickings, like I appreciate the lessons and sometimes the need to kind of slow down and make sure that all the I's are dotted and the T's are crossed. So I always, I mean, I've never really been bothered by stress.
Right.
Just because I really feel so aligned.
A lot of people want to get dig deeper on that, because that's a big deal. That's
Right.
awesome. Well, yeah, you know, and I got to know your wife because I took a Nia dance class.
Yeah.
Which was a really amazing experience. It was like 70 people and me, and it was 68 women and me and this other guy. And I was like, I'm here to dance. That's all I'm here for. But she is a force of nature. But it was and I'm doing Nia dance somewhere else. But it was such a great experience, and she's just such an amazing person. We could have a whole hour discussion on her awesomeness for sure.
Yeah.
The other question that someone wanted to get into is, and you could answer this from a perspective of somebody wanting to write a book, like talk a little bit about like the writing process, like how that worked with you, what you loved about it, what you hated about it. Like when I wrote, I really had to force myself some days to like get up and do something, and it would be sometimes 12 pages of garbage, but nonetheless. So talk a little bit about kind of your process. What was that like? What was hard about it? What did you really enjoy about it?
So that my publisher keeps telling me not to say this, but I'm a really bad writer. You know, I think I'm a great storyteller, but I've always been a pretty bad writer. So the challenge for me was that was going to take extra time, right, to make sure that I really got it right. But the process was that I'd wake up every morning at 4, and I'd have basically 3 hours before the kids woke up,
right,
and before I had to help get them ready for school, and you know they were a lot younger then, and that was my time, that was my me time, you know, and I'd write for as long as I could. Sometimes I'd go off for all 3 hours. Sometimes I'd go for 20 minutes,
right.
And I never got mad at myself if I could only go for 20 minutes, you know, and I'd head to the gym or do something else.
Right.
But that was the process for the better part of 2 years while
Right.
I like put the first draft of the manuscript together. I'd finish a chapter and I'd read it to Lola. She has not read the finished book. She keeps saying that she will, but she's like, I've caught enough of it throughout the
she knows
the
it by
writing
heart.
process. And look, for anybody who's serious about it, I highly recommend it. Surround yourself with incredible authors. So I had Wes Moore in my corner, I had D. Watkins in my corner, I had Chris Wilson in my corner,
Right.
and I went to those guys. I had Joe McClinsky in my corner. Wish I had known about your books, because I would have bugged you a lot more.
Well, you would have been. My books look good on a shelf. They're likely to put you to sleep because they're about nerdy nonprofit stuff. So if you're trying to get to bed early, read my books.
Right. I don't believe that. But I so blessed to have those guys who were really real with me,
right?
You know, and who had been through the process of getting not only books out, but really successful books.
Yeah.
And they gave me unlimited amounts of their time and attention.
Yeah.
And I love paying that forward now, right? I get a lot of calls now from folks are thinking about starting a book or towards the end of a book. And, it's a process.
It is.
It's a process.
It can be a grind for sure.
Yeah. You have to have a lot of humility, right? So you set out to write these books that you are convinced are going to change the world and that are going to sell millions of copies. So I put 5 years into it to have a finished manuscript, right? And so you have to go out and get an agent, right? And so I was like, this is going to be so easy. I'm friends with Chris Wilson and Dee and Wes, and they're going to call all of their agents.
Special handshake. Yeah.
And so Chris hooks me up with his agent, and I email him so excited about that he's going to represent me. Right. He doesn't know it yet.
Yeah.
And he writes me a nice email back and I say, I don't want to, he asked for a copy of the manuscript. And I was like, I just want to come to New York to meet you.
Right.
He's like, I'm not interested in meeting you. Send me a copy of the manuscript and close the conversation. So you end up sending out like a bit of a summary of the book.
Right.
I sent it to 40 agents and not a single one responded. Right. And you can't get to a publisher without an agent.
Right.
Miraculously, like I had bumped into some woman who had a friend who was an agent, and so she calls back and says that she loves the concept of the book. She's so she becomes my agent. She's from a small town in Texas that I never heard of. I think I was her second book.
Nice.
And she was the only one that like believed in me.
Yeah.
And then you have to do the same thing with all the like publishing houses. And again, so now I've got an agent. I'm official, right?
Yeah.
And you send the manuscript to all the publishing houses.
Right.
And I'm expecting now that I have an agent and I'm official that like the phone's going to ring off the hook from like the big 5 Penguin House publishers and Random House and all of these things. And same thing, crickets, and I'm only getting 2 publishers that responded. One of them would not have been a good fit. And one of them was amazing.
Right.
The New World Library, I'm so grateful for. And they kind of exist to publish books that are in some way going to kind of change the way the world turns.
That's awesome.
But it's a really humbling experience.
Yeah.
And really make sure that any aspiring author knows that going in.
Yeah. I mean, honestly, I think it's the world's a better place because this book is in it. I'm glad you found the small town Texas individual. God bless her for being that. So, last question, which is my own, as we kind of end our time here. Now that you've gone through this, like, what are you really hopeful for? Like, what are you excited about now in terms of what you see in Baltimore and the larger world? Like, give the crowd and give the millions that are on the camera watching all over the world.
Millions in small towns in Texas.
That's exactly right. What are you hopeful about? What gets you excited right now?
Look, I think the thing that I'm most excited about is the family that we have at Seawall. The book kind of solidified and thank you all for letting me tell our story. But the book solidified the reason why we do this work,
right,
and the reason why we do it differently. In my heart, at least, it made it somewhat official. It's written down now,
right.
The story's there if anybody has questions about it. And I think our ability to change the narrative more than we ever have in the past, like that time has come now. It's been a hard 15 years to get to this point, right? And I'm so excited what the next 15 years look like because we're approaching it with real intentionality. In the past, it was the naive follow your heart, which is really important in that like startup phase.
Right.
But now it's intentional.
Right.
Now we think we're on to something.
Yeah.
Now we're getting like a lot more phone calls.
Nice. Who's calling you?
Yeah, look, I mean, folks throughout the city of Baltimore.
Nice.
In East and West Baltimore, parts of town that we haven't quite figured out how to have meaningful impact in.
Right.
And in neat ways where we're going to be able to be behind the scenes.
Yes.
Hopefully you never hear about the projects we're working on.
Right.
But really cool projects happen led by really inspiring young developers. and it'll be their show, and we'll be as quietly behind the scenes as possible. The Lexington Market piece is going to open up the door for kind of work around the country. I've said this publicly, and I'll continue to say it. I really hope our company plays a major role in the redevelopment of the Harbor Place. I think that project's perfect for us. I think our ability to listen on a citywide level, is what that project needs at this time. And Jim Rouse is a hero of mine, probably the reason that we're sitting here today. And would love to help make sure that his legacy continues in a way that's meaningful to our city.
We'll hope, fingers crossed for that too. Thibault, thank you so much for this. But not only that, thank you so much for everything you do for Baltimore, the leadership that you provide to the Seawall team, and thank you for your friendship. But just thank you for being you, larger than yourself.
Thank you, John.
Thank you.
I would like to thank you, Thibault, for joining us this evening, and you, John, for also joining us this evening. It's been an honor to listen to you both talk about your journey and the book and sort of the ups and downs of how the book became real. I want to also thank our wonderful audience, both virtual and in person, for joining us this evening. I want to thank the Hearing and Speech Agency for providing accessibility for tonight's program. And with that, we're going to sign off for this evening. You've all been wonderful, and it's a pleasure to intro and outro both of our guests, and for all of you as well. Stay safe, take care, and have a good rest of your evening.
Thank you.